everyone. Welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey, and with me today I have...
I'm Richard Wong. I'm the Vice President of Regulatory and Operations at the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers.
And the reason we have Richard on today is because CAPP just recently put out a report about supply chains and communities, Indigenous and otherwise, and their engagement with LNG and with petroleum producers in BC. So I guess I'd start with what was the impetus for this report? How did it come about in the first place?
Yeah, thanks, Warren. And first off, just let me thank you for your interest in this work. We've surveyed BC's natural gas and oils supply chain in the past, but this report is really the most recent and the most comprehensive that our members participated in with the research group iTotem. The report tracked the impact and the reach of the supply chain spending related to operations in BC over the years from 2018 to 2021. And I have to say the results surprised even us at CAPP in terms of the vast reach of our integrated supply chain. If you don't mind, maybe I'll just give a few of the key highlights. With respect to the upstream oil and natural gas industry, we spent about $4.7 billion in 140 municipalities and Indigenous nations over the time period from 2018 to 2021, with more than 2,400 BC-based businesses. About $540 million of spending was with Indigenous affiliated businesses located here in BC. And this total actually grew almost 150% over that period, which really, I think, reflects the rapidly increasing role of Indigenous participation in the industry. Our members also spent about $260 million on restoration and reclamation efforts as well, and about $17 million on community investment. I think one thing that I would just want to highlight, it's really important to note that all this investment happened through the pandemic years. And so it was really helping to sustain critically needed and well-paying jobs in communities all over BC. And it goes without saying that we should also be recognizing the dedication and the sacrifice of a lot of our essential energy workers who ensured that we all benefited from uninterrupted flows of secure and affordable energy during a crisis. And so maybe if I just sum up, the iTotem study in my mind just really shows that BC's natural gas and oil industry is really built on a foundation of shared benefits and local working relationships.
And about those working relationships, or some Indigenous, not all, but some Indigenous communities are quite remote. So how much of a challenge was that in terms of supply chain continuity? Because I would assume the further out you got to go, the tougher it is to build a supply chain.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that while many communities are remote, that's actually, part of the opportunity. And so, as I mentioned, the BC natural gas sector spent $540 million with some 100 BC-based Indigenous affiliated businesses. We kind of mapped out where those Indigenous affiliated vendors were according to the BC Assembly of First Nations mapping. And, about 83% of Indigenous affiliated spend and about 75% of Indigenous affiliated vendors were actually in the Northeast region based on the AFN map. From a regional district perspective, that area covers the Peace River Regional District. The second region with the highest Indigenous spend and Indigenous affiliated vendor count at 7% and 11% respectively was actually within the Lower Mainland Southwest region, or the Greater Vancouver Regional District. And so, as I said earlier, I think, as engagement between Indigenous communities and the oil and natural gas industry deepens, there's really a growing recognition, I think, of the value that Indigenous businesses hold as suppliers of both goods and services. You referenced how many communities are remote, but in these ways, they're actually located closer to operations. They can offer competitive prices, and these communities understand industry's challenges. And in some cases, these business relationships have really developed to become partnerships with co-owned projects. I would also say, Indigenous people are among the youngest and fastest growing demographics in Canada. And there's an opportunity to achieve mutual benefits with this local and stable workforce. And I think, there's broader value too in employing Indigenous community members, including, the incorporation of local knowledge, reduced transportation costs, and as I said, accommodation costs in remote work areas. So I think, Indigenous employment in oil and natural gas is really critical, contributing skills and local knowledge that are essential to project success and to continued operations. And I think our industry recognizes that supporting education and training initiatives really aligns with the interests in the development of a local skilled workforce.
I think we touched on it a little bit, but the top five cities or population centers listed in the report were Fort St. John, Dawson Creek, Pouce Coupe, I hope I said that right, Vancouver, and Wanawon. I can guess why Vancouver is because of the population, but as for the rest of them, maybe there are different reasons for Vancouver. Why were they the top five in terms of spending?
Yeah, I think the first reason is just proximity to the phenomenal resources that are found in Northeast British Columbia. The Western Canada Sedimentary Basin extends to that portion of BC, just east of the Rocky Mountains, and encompasses those communities of Fort St. John, Dawson Creek, and Wanawon. The municipality of Fort St. John, unsurprisingly, I think, led BC's supply chain activities in terms of both spend and the number of businesses engaged, and was really the hub of BC's natural gas supply chain activities between 2018 and 2021. I think more generally, there's been oil and natural gas industry interest in BC for over 50 years. The West Coast Energy Pipeline was Canada's first big-inch pipeline, and it connected natural gas supply from this region to Vancouver in 1957. And that was a phenomenal construction achievement that was led by BC businessman Frank McMahon. And I think more generally, in the mid 2000s, we really saw unprecedented innovations that led to the development of BC's shale and tight gas resources. And with this transformation, our industry has really transitioned into becoming, what could be regarded as a high-tech industry. We have a lot of demand for specialized equipment, for engineering services, for environmental services, communication services, and general employment of advanced technologies. And it's really widened the geographic reach of the supply chain to places like Vancouver and Cranbrook and Vancouver Island, just to name a few.
One of the figures cited in the report was the $260 million for reclamation and remediation activities. Is that an increase from previous activity, and what kind of activities were undertaken?
Yeah, I think with respect to reclamation and remediation, we've really seen a significant focus on increasing activity in this regard over the last few years, and we've done a lot of work with the government of British Columbia to enhance the policy and the regulatory framework to make sure that sites are being reclaimed and restored in a timely fashion. Reclamation and remediation activities of about 260 million were reported by about 280 businesses located in some 35 municipalities across British Columbia, and 11% of these businesses were Indigenous affiliated. And certainly we've seen, with respect to BC-based vendors who are active in reclamation and remediation activities, we saw a consistent year-over-year increase in activity and spend between 2018 and 2021.
And also greenhouse gas reduction is cited in the report. How much of that is due to the use of natural gas, which has less, it still has GHGs, but there's less of them? And how much is other factors like carbon capture mitigation and other high-tech technologies?
Yeah, Canada's oil and natural gas industry, I think first off is really characterized by collaboration in order to address climate change. One example that you may be aware of is the Pathways Alliance that joins competing companies together to pool their knowledge and their technologies and their investment dollars to achieve the goal of net zero emissions from oil sands production by 2050. Thanks to innovations that are already in place, oil sands mining emission intensity in Alberta has decreased significantly by 14% from 2013 to 2019, even as production has increased by about 60%. And so that same spirit of innovation really permeates to the rest of industry. From 2010 to 2019, emissions intensity from producing natural gas liquids, and condensate decreased by 33%, even as production grew by over 30%. One of the largest contributions Canada can really make to lowering greenhouse gas emissions globally is by exporting Canadian liquefied natural gas to displace the use of coal in the world's energy mix in both industrial processes and in electricity generation. And, I think the international community is taking collective action ultimately to lower emissions intensity from the global energy portfolio. And as a result, the global demand for natural gas is high, and we expect that to be sustained for decades to come. But at the same time, Canadian producers are global leaders in emissions reducing technologies, including in new technologies to eliminate things like methane venting, sophisticated imaging technologies to minimize fugitive emissions, and also the advancement, as you mentioned, of carbon capture. So I think, the key to our future will really be the ability for our industry to continually and quickly advance these new technologies to continue reducing emissions intensity. And focusing on things like carbon capture, energy efficiency, and other emissions reducing technologies is going to be beneficial to all sectors effort to lower greenhouse gas emissions through shared infrastructure and through technology development as well. And with respect to global markets, our advantage comes not only from our vast reserves, but also in the way that we produce them. So it's really, for us as Canadians, a potential competitive advantage that should be our competitive advantage at the end of the day. So if we can find a path forward on energy and climate related issues that ensures, continued reliable supply of oil and natural gas to global markets, while still maintaining that focus on reducing emissions, that gets us kind of to that win-win scenario.
Okay, and in the report, it cited community investment, other than not just infrastructure, because I'm sure there was a lot of it, but besides infrastructure, natural gas infrastructure, what other kind of community investments were cited in the report?
Yeah, in addition to just infrastructure, and as you noted, that was quite significant. Our participants also reported contributing significantly in community investments, about $17 million between 2018 and 2021. And this was in the form of sponsorships and donations and in-kind contributions, supporting more than 350 organizations in over 25 municipalities and Indigenous nations across BC. And, with respect to the types of things that this community investment went towards, there was a significant focus on Indigenous community investment, on business improvement organizations, and then also on educational support. And just on the piece around Indigenous community investment, more than $13 million in community investments supporting over 75 Indigenous communities and organizations were cited.
And finally, this report is, I believe, open to the public since I've read it, and pretty much anybody can. So where should people go to see this report and read it for themselves?
Yeah, so the report is available on CAPP's website, capp.ca, and certainly there's a lot of great information there in addition to this report about Canada's upstream oil and natural gas industry.
Great. Thanks for joining us today, Richard.
Thanks so much, Warren.